Phil Cutler stood in the center of what would become the dance floor, in the building that was now his. It was too early to do the paperwork. Some time would have to pass. However, he had no doubt that Dortwich would keep his word. The memorial service for the victims of the botched charity mission was held an hour ago. The usual pep talk, promises, calls to stand firm, and an announcement that New St. Louis was not ready to open to the outside world. It had all been planned. Everything except the deaths of a few dozen people. The city was supposed to be mourning a single victim. But damn it, this is the zombie apocalypse. Who says everything always goes according to plan? Having played his part at the funeral service, he went here. Cutler inhaled the invigorating scent of freedom, his fingers in the pockets of his black jeans. This was his future club. With it, he would leave the war and all that crap behind forever. He would organize his own personal paradise with hot chicks, music, and good alcohol. So what if there was a shortage in the country, and that the country itself was long gone? But there were people who wanted to have fun, and Harvey didn't care anymore. Cutler had fulfilled his part of the deal. The rest was none of his business. Imagining himself to be the big boss, Phil didn't hear the door open behind him. But he did hear the click of heels, amplified by the acoustics of the empty room. He turned, expecting to see Dortwich, but immediately swallowed the sarcastic greeting. "Oh, and you're here. I didn't know where to go. Home, you know. Everything reminds me of him. And frankly, I'm not sure this is my home anymore. I think they'll take it away as soon as..." Well, Loane hesitated, twirling a lock of blonde hair around her finger with a shiny nail. "I'm not his wife. Do you have the keys?" Phil squinted, trying to find the catch. Harvey's ex-girlfriend looked forlornly at the unfinished walls in the bar with an open bottle of champagne on it. The man was celebrating. He had a reason, but she didn't need to know the details. "Yeah, Harvey left them with me. Said you could come over and check on things while I was gone. He was like, grumpy asshole? Caring," they said together, and Loane added with a sad smile. "Well, that too, yes. He could be an unbearable bore, especially when it came to himself, but otherwise he was mostly nice." Phil found himself watching her bite her full lips, a childish confusion on her face. A beautiful doll, a gift to the nation's savior, and a pill for the drunkenness into which Harvey had sunk a year and a half ago. When the work of inspiring the survivors had ended, the gray-skinned messiah had lost his taste for life in the Zedai liquor supply. "I will miss him." "Yes, me too." Phil put his hand on her shoulder and squeezed it reassuringly. "It's a great loss for all of us, but you're certainly feeling it the hardest right now." "Oh, thank you. Your words mean a lot to me. You were there. You saw so much death and miraculously survived. It must have been terrible." Finding himself at dawn, surrounded by the dead bodies of his former comrades, stuffing the brains of an Asian bitch into his mouth? Of course, he should have felt something other than the cold that was seeping into his bones. Everyone was dead. Even Gary. Phil had taken 2 bullets to the chest, and at that moment all he cared about was that he was still here. "What are you going to do next?" Loane squeezed his hand as if she wanted to bring back the feeling of his shoulder. "I'll start with a clean slate. No more war. I've had enough of this shit." Phil turned her palm over, stroked it with his thumb, feeling the smoothness of the skin. A well-groomed bitch who would have doubted it, and nodded towards the counter. "How? About a drink? Oh, champagne. Celebrating something?" Loane asked, surprised. "A new life," Phil chuckled. He put his arm around the mayor's former flame and moved with her to the bar counter. "Hope is good. To survive such horror there, beyond the barrier." Loane shook her head sympathetically, glanced sideways at the lonely bottle of champagne. "My God, isn't it like being born again? You have no idea how close you are to the truth. There was no furniture in the room. No glassware." Phil was going to drink alone. He didn't need glasses for that. But now he decided he should leave a couple here for the future. start exploring the territory even with such an insignificant detail. So, Loane frowned as if it was starting to dawn on her. Where did you get the keys? I thought you weren't involved in the project. Tell the truth? Sooner or later she'll find out, it's just a matter of time. Besides, Harvey's ex doesn't decide anything anyway. I'm not stupid. Are you in charge here now? Loane interrupted him, pursing her lips in annoyance. Right on target, Phil deftly grabbed the bottle by the neck. The bubbles rustled inside. The dark green glass pleasantly cooled the skin. This was Harvey's project, his manifesto for life against destruction and death. Dortwich decided it would be best to hand it over to the one who had been with him in his last moments. Who will carry on, he said, tasting the words he had yet to repeat. The official paperwork won't start for another week. They have other things to worry about, but yes, I'm in charge now. It's not fair. The blonde turned away from him, leaning her elbows on the counter. They wanted me to entertain him, and now that it's over, I'm no longer needed. They'll throw me out of the house. Sheila won't take me back. I was rude to her last time. I dumped so much shit on her. I'll have to live in a dark area because I won't have enough money. And I didn't even think that this could happen. Hey, Lo, listen. Don't make a tragedy. All is not lost. Phil handed her the bottle. Drink. The girl sobbed loudly, took the bottle and took several greedy sips, frozen in the pose of a bugler. The bubbles immediately hit her nose. She winced, throwing a wet-eyed glance at Phil. Don't tell me you loved him, the man thought, watching the drops slide down the thin neck to the silicone boobs. How long do people wear silicone anyway? I loved him. We all loved him. To one degree or another, he pulled a handkerchief from the back pocket of his jeans. I can offer you a job. I won't promise partnership. But what about the hall manager? Phil took the bottle from her and, coming closer, dabbed a drop of it with a handkerchief, trying to reach the neckline of her blouse. Paper towels would have worked better, but no one had made them for 6 years. He drank, savoring the drink of victory. There was a brewery in town. Who knew? One day they would revive wine production too. Administrator? Loane swallowed nervously, thoughtful. Someone has to help me run the club. Why not hire you? I think you're the best person for the job. Those pompous know-it-alls can go to hell with their plans, he snorted, referring to Meg and Lambert. But you and I can show that they're not the only ones calling the shots here. Yes. Well, there you go. A shy smile. I like it. What do you think? Good idea. I want to try it. What does the administrator do? I have no idea. We can ask Dortwich. She should know. To hell with Dortwich. Screw her, Phil agreed, watching Lone's genuine sadness turn into a cheerful smile. We have more in common, little Lo. They talked and drank, passing the bottle. Soon Loane, with some help from Phil, settled on the counter. He stood there like a gentleman, occasionally touching her thigh where her loose skirt ended. I took away your club, the ability to control zombies, and now I'm going to fuck your beautiful girlfriend. Just because I can, he thought, making another stupid joke to make the blonde laugh. His co-worker Gary laughed too when Phil joked, louder than anyone else. And then Phil found out why. It wasn't that he was homophobic, he was tired of pretending not to notice. In a way, Phil felt relieved that he didn't have to play this absurd theater anymore. Loane laughed infectiously and lively. She told how hard it was for her to live with Sheila when Lambert found her and offered her a job. At first she doubted it. He was all gray. What if it was contagious? But Lambert had science on his side and the promise of a warm place with the future mayor of New St. Louis, and he turned out to be not so bad. At some point, Loane realized that she should not have told this, but Phil reassured her. For him, it was as much a secret as the fact that Harvey kept the second beauty, the brunette Maeve, close by with the power of his Jedi. But Lo, it seemed, was content to consider herself the heroine of Pretty Woman. They'd almost finished the champagne when Phil decided that the blonde was warmed up enough. Her cheeks were pink from the drink. Her speech was fast and confused, but He hadn't followed what she was saying for a long time. The usual drunken chatter. It was funny and even cute for an escort girl to carry off half a bottle of sparkling wine. While she was finishing her drink, Phil gently took a place between her legs and, wrapping his arms around her waist, pressed her to himself. He buried his face in the hollow between her breasts and inhaled the floral scent of perfume mixed with the smell of a warm female body. Loane left the bottle alone, slid her hands down his neck, ran her fingers through his hair bleached by mutation. She wanted him no less. He felt how hot it was in the blonde's groin and, kissing her lips, he strove to get to her bare skin. He did not unbutton the last buttons on her blouse. He tugged them in different directions. Plastic circles rolled across the floor. Lo was biting his tongue, and it was so strange inside. Between greedy kisses, she unbuttoned his black shirt halfway and helped him pull it over his head. Then Phil took off the blonde's bra and worked on her breasts, squeezing her erect nipples between his fingers, covering them with kisses and lightly biting. Loane purred, leaning her hands on the counter. The man felt the blood pounding in his temples as he went lower. The salty taste of sweat, the soft, pliant body under his lips, the languid sighs of the blonde. All this excited him so much, as if at some point he began to feel tastes and smells many times more acutely. Maybe it was all in the background. In fact, he was going to fuck the mayor's widow, to whose death he had had a hand. Literally. And he also hadn't had sex since he died, the second time. All this heightened the senses. At one point, while tracing Loane's neat navel with his tongue, he pulled away for a moment. A growl escaped from her throat. The girl laughed, and then screamed as if she had been breaking glass with her voice her whole life. In a split second, while Phil was trying to figure out what had happened, Loane, still screaming, grabbed the bottle by the neck. One blow to the head. A ringing in his ears as if he had been hit by a train. Disoriented, Phil staggered back, saw blood on the smooth belly he had just been licking. He covered his mouth with his hand, tasting the salty taste on his tongue. His heart was pounding so fast in his chest. "Your mother! You fool! You almost killed me!" he shouted, angry at the blow to the head, angry for the bummer. And what's wrong with him anyway? "You bit me, idiot! What kind of sore subject is this? Now I'll have a scar. I didn't mean to. It was all a little out of control," he muttered uncertainly, looking at the red spot. "Oh my God," Loane snorted. "What the hell? You like playing zombies?" "You." Sliding to the floor, she quickly put on her bra, grabbed a handkerchief from the counter and pressed it hard to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Phil looked down at his fingers, which still had blood on them. He licked it off his teeth. How did it happen that he almost snatched a piece of meat from the girl he was about to screw? "I think I understand how you managed to survive the apocalypse. Good reaction. Thank you. Damn freak. What should I do now? Need to put a bandage on or..." "Ah! Why did you have to ruin everything? I thought you were normal, but you're a fucking psycho." If only Phil had listened to himself. No. He didn't feel hunger, nor did he feel the desire to eat brains. But then a sudden flash, a clouding, and the languid evening suddenly ceased to be such. The frosty dawn, beyond the barrier, did not pass without a trace for him. So, what should I do now? Go to the hospital? Loane threw up her hands. "Let me take a look." She shrugged her shoulders, feigning horrific offense, but still allowed him to come closer and remove the wet handkerchief from the wound. "It's not that bad," Phil said, suppressing his nausea. He had seen wounds in war. Horrible, disgusting. A human bite was nothing, but these were the marks of his teeth. "Do you think so?" "Yes. You won't even have to darn it. But you should put a bandage on it. We can go to my place. I can handle it myself, thanks." Damn. If I die of tetanus, it'll be all your fault. "Hey, I'm brushing my teeth." "Go to hell." Loane threw her blouse over herself and buttoned up the remaining buttons. Blood continued to ooze from the wound, but not as much. After standing there with the handkerchief and not finding a replacement, Loane resolutely trotted in her heels toward the exit. "I can give you a ride. Go." "You!" The door slammed. Phil Cutler was left alone. His ears were ringing from the blow to the head, and he had a feeling that this was not going to end well for him. On the new floor lay 2 shiny buttons, a bottle with a wet spot leaking out, and a blood-soaked handkerchief. He listened to his feelings again. There was a slight ache in the pit of his stomach, but it could have been ordinary hunger. After all, Phil hadn't eaten since morning. Deciding to fix that, the man put on his shirt and left his future club. Life sucks, but you know, being alive is better than being dead. Phil rolled the rest of his whiskey on the ice. "Pour some more, buddy." "Condolences, brother." Andre, the bartender and owner of the old Coyote, took his glass and began to fill a new one. "Where my family comes from, they say, 'Born with a silver spoon in your mouth.'" Phil smiled grimly. He didn't want to discuss the details of the charity mission where everyone had died. He had enough alcohol in him to blurt out too much. Andre put another whiskey on the bar with ice and disappeared from view for a while, serving another customer. The bar was barely half full. 11 o'clock was too early for night owls. Phil rolled the whiskey over his tongue, swallowed, feeling the liquid fire sinking down. The situation with Loane wouldn't leave my mind. Have you ever had a situation where you're with a girl, everything's okay, and suddenly he falters, not knowing how to explain the situation without saying the word bite out loud? Of course, sometimes Andre nodded understandingly, leaned his elbows on the counter and moved closer. Is it true? It happens to everyone, from time to time. The main thing is, don't dwell on it. Give yourself time, to come to your senses after everything. But don't drag it out. The longer you drag it out, the more afraid you'll be that it will happen again. And when it comes down to it, you know. It's all in the brain. The bearded man tapped his temple and winked. Well, yes. Phil forced a smile and tried to hide his expression behind his glass. He took another sip, realizing that it was not worth starting the conversation. If Andre decided that he had problems with his erection, then let him think so. Well, it would also be good if the girl turned out to be understanding. Yes, of course. Cutler closed in, feeling a little on edge. What had happened that afternoon at his future club, and what had happened beyond the barrier, was probably related to the vaccine and the second goddamn death. Maybe I'm immortal, he thought with hidden glee, then stopped. Maybe I'll have to eat human flesh. The little blonde bitch had turned him on and whacked him over the head. Phil barely remembered biting into her soft belly, but as he continued to drink, he thought about how good it felt to lick the blood from his teeth. Bartender. Vodka. There was a smell of bad breath and gasoline from the right. A skinny biker in a ZA rider's vest pushed Phil aside, raising his hand in salute to Andre. There's plenty of room here, Phil muttered and turned away. But a second later he was looking at the biker again, studying him. He didn't even pay attention to his words. He was talking to another customer, waiting for his order. Tall, skinny, about 50 years old with a 3-day stubble on his flabby face, a fleshy nose. Soup set. Maybe brains will do, Phil chuckled to himself. And here I am, a gentleman looking for dinner. No, this is complete nonsense. He brushed these thoughts aside, and then Yakamura's brains started creeping into his head. Cold, slippery to the touch, falling into his throat piece by piece, with a sharp metallic smell of blood. A sharp spasm twisted his stomach. Phil doubled over, clutching his stomach. His mouth filled with saliva, and at the same time he felt like he could throw up right then and there. Thanks, buddy. The biker picked up a vodka shot, downed it, and as if he were the only one there, elbowed Phil again. Hey! Sorry, man. Blood pounded in my temples. Everything started spinning before my eyes. Excuse me, I said. The biker slapped him on the shoulder. Are you deaf or something? Did your mother drop you on your head when you were a kid? Phil? Andre froze, looking at him worriedly. Everything okay? Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Slowly, as if you were holding an object in your sights. If he were to bite into a guy he barely knew, Andre's sawed-off shotgun would be staring him in the face. Zombies don't rise from a bullet in the head. And what about him? Everything is fine with us. Hey, want some vodka? I'll treat you. As an apology for the miss, the biker didn't finish. In a split second, Phil grabbed him by the neck, throwing his arm off his shoulder, found himself on his feet and slamming his face hard against the counter. He twisted one of the biker's arms behind his back so that he found himself in a hopeless position. Phil listened. No one was in a hurry to intercede, and the biker himself sobbed. The sound was muffled and pitiful. Phil shook him again and let go. Andre, who'd been holding his hands on the counter the whole time, exhaled. "Thanks for the company," Phil said to him, turning to leave. "I'm going for a walk. It's gotten too stuffy in here. Go home, old man. And remember my advice." The bartender's voice reached him. "Of course," he breathed out as he left the bar. "He will go home, but not right away." Phil Cutler wasn't going to go far. Suddenly, everything fell into place. No need to look for shortcuts, just figure out what rules to play by. How long had it been since he returned to the city? A few days? A week? He ate normal food, drank, slept. He was quite healthy, if you don't count a few scars from bullets. How many of Yakamura's brains had he managed to eat before he finally became himself? Enough. But then he was more dead. So he had satisfied his hunger and could live normally. And everything was fine. Until today. Until Loane's bite. Until this mess with the biker. The lights were on in front of the bar. Phil pulled the car over to where it would attract less attention. He had to go further, circling the streets, following some instinct. It wouldn't be hard to find the tall, skinny pain in the ass when he came out. Phil remembered his smell, the smell of bad breath, unwashed body, and gasoline. No, he wouldn't bite him. And he wouldn't leave the body for everyone to see. He'd take it in the trunk to Carondelet, in the trash hills. There used to be a crazy lady there, a former Zeta scientist. But since her zombie husband ate her, no one cared about the trash hills. So they wouldn't look for the body there. His skills in stalking an ambush would help him track the biker down and remain undetected. He'd take a good spot and wait. And when he did, Phil pulled a folding knife from his jacket pocket. The click and steel reflected the full moon. When he waited, he would find out how much brain it took to be human. He was awakened by a phone call. Phil opened his eyes and rolled over onto his back. Not many people in town knew his number. He had nothing to do with Guy's special forces anymore, and it would hardly have occurred to a couple of his dandy acquaintances to call him early in the morning. It was cloudy outside, so it was hard to tell what time it was, but Phil had gone to bed late, and the morning was still early for him. There were people from Z Industries left, and these would wait and call back. The man liked to make them wait. Meg and Lambert got what they wanted, even though the operation had not been without unexpected losses. The history for the population had to be rewritten on the fly. Now New St. Louis was in their hands alone. Finally, the phone went silent. Phil grinned, closed his eyes and stretched, getting ready to take another nap. The call came again. Whoever was calling apparently would not leave him alone, and he had to reach for the receiver. Hello. A telephone was still a luxury, with those who wanted it having to pay through the nose for a monthly subscription. For Phil, this luxury was free, except for silence. That had been one of his demands a year and a half ago. Now he wasn't sure it was worth it. Phil Cutler? Came a female voice on the other end of the line. Uh-huh. He fell on the pillow and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Who's talking? Phil? It's Loane. I didn't know who else to call. Phil's voice was nervous and he pursed his lips. Where did you get my number? Oh my God, I had to call a couple of your friends. I hope it's not too bad because very, very bad. You woke me up, you naughty girl. Another time I would have been glad to have such a nice stalker, but you're not listening to me, Phil. Come here right now. I need your help. She shouted so loudly that Phil took the phone away from his ear. So? She seems to have gone silent. I think I killed a man. I think? What do you mean? You're not sure he's dead? Another guy got hit in the head with a bottle? Check his pulse and go get some sleep. I'm sure he'll be fine. He has no head, Phil. No pulse. It's all... Oh my God. I don't understand how this happened. Phil sat up. The dream had gone, and his thoughts returned to their heated meeting. A little less than a week had passed, and he'd already forgotten about it. Well, it had bitten him. It happens to everyone. Everyone was alive and happy. Almost. At least, that's what he had decided. And suddenly it turned out that everything wasn't so simple. Damn. Come, I beg you. Do you have a pen at hand? I'll dictate the address. I will remember. Loane gave an address far enough from his place, but not a dark area, which was expected. How could there be a phone connection in dark areas? Her voice kept shaking and breaking. Just hurry up, I'm so scared. Lord, don't drag anyone else into this. Your friends? They're not my friends, Phil snapped. I'll tell them you were moaning loudly and that's enough. Okay? I'll be there soon. Don't stick your head out, draw the curtains, and sit quietly. Well, that's where the plastic-lined trunk would come in handy. Last time he'd stuffed the guy in there as is, driven to the trash hills and back, parked the car next to the house, and in the morning, he'd gone cold when he saw a trickle of blood running down the pavement. For a fee, the guy at the car wash pretended he hadn't seen anything. People were still dying, some of them suddenly and alone. It used to be that if such a guy was in sight, it was the duty of any resident to put him to rest and take him to the abode, where they'd register him, notify his loved ones, and dispose of him. But those days were gone. People no longer came to him after he died. Phil sincerely hoped that the car wash guy would keep quiet, and that he, like everyone else, didn't need any problems with ZI. He would be more careful now. There was an empty trailer in the trash hills, the former home of a crazy scientist. He had left a plastic water barrel, a hose, a rotary plant, and fuel for the generator. He had discovered an unpopular library from which he had stolen a suitable book. He'd been planning to make a sprinkler one of these days. Well, it seemed that those days had come. Phil quickly got dressed, put on his shoes, and having remembered something, returned to the kitchen to the refrigerator. Maybe the beast didn't need to be fed, because it had already satisfied its hunger. Loane had a bite, otherwise he wouldn't have needed to go somewhere and solve other people's problems. Although, to some extent, these were his problems too. But it wouldn't hurt him to have a bite before meeting the poor guy who lived at the address given. An aluminum bowl with a plastic lid sat against the wall, on the top shelf behind the containers of food from Granny Tommy's. Phil took out his supply, yanked his knife out of its holder, and walked to the table, where with a couple of confident movements he opened the bowl, cut off a small, finger-sized piece of gelatinous meat and, lifting it with the tip of the knife, popped it into his mouth. Bliss immediately spread through his body and his mouth watered. Phil had no idea what rich people had felt in the past when they ordered foie gras in these tiny portions, but perhaps he was a little closer to understanding it now. After chewing the raw, chilled piece, the man swallowed it, put the lid on the bowl, and returned it to the refrigerator, pushing it back into place. The biker's brain would serve him for a while, but if there were two of them, he would need twice as many brains. This means twice the problems. So, Phil faltered, searching for a title for the carnage he saw in the master bedroom. Are you saying that all this is your work? Loane, standing next to him barefoot and wearing only a man's shirt, groaned in confusion and turned away. I don't know. It all happened so suddenly. A second ago I was with him, and then it was like I passed out. I don't remember anything. I come to, and around me, The blonde started whining. She was shaking with nervous tremors, and Phil couldn't think of anything better than to tap her on the shoulder. And I'm sitting on him, my hands in his fucking skull, and... Phil, how is this even possible? I'm eating brains. I know, he thought, but didn't say it out loud. She shuddered and turned away, puking onto the carpet. The man sighed sadly. It would take some work to get this bedroom in order. They didn't want any trouble. He might have immunity in the ZI and the right connections to pull if necessary. But once people around him found out that one of them was eating brains, the conversation would be short. The zombie outbreak that had swept through New Saint, Louis a year and a half ago, had shaken the public consciousness. Those who had forgotten what it was like beyond the barrier had woken up. They suddenly remembered that zombies were real and that they could take everything from them in a split second. Loane was vomiting, making disgusting noises over the carpet. He too would have to be stuffed into the Pontiac Torrent and hauled to the dump. Phil inhaled the sharp iron smell with a persistent miasma of shit. It seemed the poor guy had managed to shit himself from such hot sex with his body. And looked over the work. Front once more. The bed took up at least half of the bedroom. On it, with his arms, or rather, his hand, spread out, lay what had once been a man. Phil could easily verify this because he was naked and the zombie's paraphernalia was of no interest. Only his brains. The poor guy's chest had been thoroughly chewed by someone. Blood had soaked the sheets. His right shoulder ended in bleeding flesh, and his torn-off hand lay on top of the things thrown next to the bed. But the most disgusting thing was definitely the face, or rather its absence. Instead of the unfortunate man's head, on the crumpled pillow there was something that looked like a huge egg covered in human skin and hair that had been crushed. Yakamura had been dead for several hours when I smashed her skull, flashed through his mind. The fragile blonde, in a fit of zombie passion, had torn off the guy's arm and crushed his skull. So not only the ability to return from the dead, but also a superpower. Not so bad, but he would have to deal with the consequences, or this girl would screw it all up. Are you all there? Phil glanced at Loane. I feel better already. Thanks for asking. She looked like crap, with red eyes and smudged mascara, blood spattered in her hair and on her shirt. It was obvious that she had managed to wash her face and hands and change into dry clothes before he arrived. Find some bag, package, anything. Gather your things. He pointed towards the rags under the severed arm. I take it that's yours. Grab the arm too. And I'll take care of the body. We need to drag it into the trunk and preferably without witnesses. Loane nodded eagerly and began to rush around the apartment, looking into closets and slamming doors. Phil pulled off his sports jacket and threw it on the back of a chair, checking first for signs of a fight. He rolled up his sleeves, looking bitterly at the upcoming task. Wrap him in sheets and a blanket, tie him up with some rope and stuff him in the trunk. But there would still be a bloody stain on the bed. It was unlikely the poor guy had prepared for such an eventuality and covered it with cellophane. And then there was the time. It was 10 o'clock when he left the apartment. The neighbors had been awake for a long time, and even if this was not a high-rise area, 1 or 2 witnesses would be enough to drown him. Phil cursed, snorted, and began to wrap the sheet and blanket around the cold body. Loane bustled around the room, picking up and stuffing her things into the bag she had found. She took the hand with disgust by the fingers, making a strange sound. Something like a girl's squeal at the sight of a fat garbage rat. Only quieter. Having laid it down, bent at the elbow, the blonde exhaled, zipped, and straightened up. She let out a stifled sob, ready to burst into tears. Oh my God. What will happen to me now? It's okay if you eat right and stick to the brain diet, Phil chuckled, finally giving up on trying to carry the body out. This is all your fault. She hit him. You bit me. You're a fucking zombie? What the fuck are you? Phil's face broke into a smug grin. Loane waited. She needed to know what he had infected her with. She stood with her bag in her hand in the middle of the carnage she had caused, but she couldn't see the most important thing. He blinked rapidly before saying, "A new stage of evolution. How do you like this option? Go to hell, seriously? After you called me?" He threw up his hands, preparing to leave. "Fine, as you wish. Figure it out yourself. Stop. Don't go." Lo stopped him halfway to the door, grabbed his shoulder. "Please, help me. I don't know what to do. No one has ever died after having sex with me. If it had been, say, a heart attack, you know, I could have calmed him down and handed him over to the abode. Have you ever done that?" Phil narrowed his eyes at her frightened ones. "Well, a long time ago. In the beginning. Then there was no need. But I know what to do. I could handle it if it was a heart attack, but this... Oh shit, I can't just go there and say what I did, can I? I can't turn you in because it won't help me anyway. Right? Honey, no one else comes here." On the verge of hysteria, trembling in his arms and yet not as stupid as he might have thought at first, Phil touched her velvet cheek, ran his knuckles over it, and leaned close, to her ear whispering, "If you don't want to end up as a Zeta guinea pig, stay away from them." After giving her a dry kiss, Phil pulled away and made his final decision. "We won't move the body. We'll burn it down along with the damn house. But it's better to get rid of your things somewhere else. You know, buttons, clasps, anything that might not burn. It's unlikely that anyone would be so thorough in dealing with the aftermath of a fire, but it's better to be on the safe side. And take your hand out." "What?" "Take your hand out and put it back where you got it from. Be a good girl, okay?" Phil winked at her, leaning over the half-wrapped warmth and grinning as he yanked out the blood-stained thong. "Hey, and don't forget this." He was still laughing as Loane fidgeted and stuffed the last of her clothes into her bag. Together they arranged the severed arm as if it were still part of the body. They found matches and gasoline in the house, pouring them liberally over the crime scene. Phil wanted to take some of the brains, but decided that the hassle of extracting the rest would take up time they didn't have. Who this guy was, whether anyone would show up at his place at this early hour, or who would be walking down the street, he wasn't going to find out. Having finished his preparations, the man looked around the room one last time, set fire to a sheet of paper from a found diary, and threw it into the center of the bed. The flames immediately shot up, igniting the body and the gasoline vapors. The room became hot. For a few more seconds, Phil watched as it licked the remains, the bed linen, and crawled toward the carpet. Loane pressed herself against him in the passageway, urging him on with her fingers nervously clenched on his shoulder. "Let's go," he said. Grabbing his jacket and leaving the bedroom door slightly open, he rushed to the exit. Quickly. The blonde walked away in her shirt, barefoot, holding a bag with her things on her shoulder. They paused for a moment at the front door as the flames devoured the bedroom and tried to engulf even more. Phil assessed the situation, peering through a crack in the drawn blinds. Quiet. No movement in the windows of the house across the street. Maybe it would blow over. They ran to the car without stopping. They sat down, Loane with a bag that had already gotten wet on the passenger seat. Phil at the wheel, hastily starting the Pontiac. Catching his displeased look, the blonde came to her senses and lowered the bag onto the rubber mat. Her heart was pounding in her chest. The car took off and raced away from the gentrified area. Someone's house was about to catch fire here. By the time that happened, they'd better be as far away as possible. And Phil knew a good place where you don't have to worry about random strangers. Garbage Hills. The fire was burning in a rusty barrel in front of the trailer. Anything that could somehow connect the mayor's ex-girlfriend to the murder, the clothes, the bag, the dead guy's shirt, had gone there. The girl with wet hair was wrapped in a travel blanket and staring at the flames. She was shaking, and Phil couldn't tell whether it was from shock or from the cold. When they arrived, he had to quickly set up a sprinkler. Loane had discovered blood in her hair and spent the entire drive lamenting how she wanted to wash it all off. Cutler was no less interested in trying himself out as a constructor, and the look on Loane's face when she realized she would have to wash herself with cold water gave him no less pleasure. He held the hose while the blonde pulled off her shirt and snorting tried to wash herself off. He had to give her his jeans and t-shirt. Phil had brought them just in case so that he would always have the opportunity to change if he got his clothes dirty. He sipped water from a small plastic bottle and watched the trembling girl out of the corner of his eye. It seemed to the man that Loane was gathering her thoughts to say something. An eternity passed, and she still did not speak. "Next time you want to get laid on an empty stomach, call me." "Well, of course. And you then will feed and "That's not what I meant, but you know that can be done too." Loane shuddered and glanced at him. "Do you have anything to drink?" Phil saluted with his water bottle and shrugged. "Today I'm detoxing." She silently took the bottle, took a sip, and exhaling heavily stared at the fire. "So now I have to eat brains. I wish I had a guide to life after death. But I wasn't dying. I wasn't sick. Well, maybe I had a little fever, but nothing out of the ordinary. Damn. Damn, damn." Lone's eyes glistened with tears again. "I'm not a zombie. Zombies become zombies when they die, and I wasn't dying." She hugged herself, shaking her head, refusing to believe it. Without saying a word, Phil began to unbutton his shirt. He hadn't taken a cold shower, and the temperature was quite bearable for a summer day. Pulling the shirt halfway down, he pointed to 2 light pink spots no bigger than a small coin, a little to the left of the center. Maybe not right in the heart, but very close. Then he took Lo's hand and put it on the scars. The blonde looked up at him, and there was undisguised horror in her eyes. It finally dawned on her. "I woke up at dawn, in the middle of a field strewn with corpses, frozen, angry, and hungry, found the first brains I could find, and the rest is history." Oh my God. It's unlikely that he has anything to do with it. "And the bullets? Are they still inside?" Loane covered her mouth with her hand. Phil turned around, pulling his shirt down further, letting her see 2 more scars tightening. Uglier, deeper, as if they had been big boils. But they were exit wounds from bullets. He was lucky none of them had lodged in his body. But what if they had? Would he have noticed the difference? He could still smell and taste the pain from the blow to his head. In a way, being dead had made him more alive. Well, maybe with a little caveat. Deciding that he had enough proof of death, Phil pulled on his shirt and began to quickly button it. 1 brain can be stretched for a couple of weeks. True, I'm not sure it will be stored for long in the refrigerator. Perhaps you should try freezing, roasting. I like it raw, but I'll have to adapt, he thought, pursing his thin lips. If the barrier were open to people, it would be possible to track newly arrived loners. Who would miss them, huh? City dwellers are a completely different matter. But we still have dark areas, full of bastards of all stripes, and just the poor. Loane hung her head sadly. Are we seriously discussing this? Killing people for food? Look at it this way. We are the first meat eaters of New Saint, Louis, maybe the world. I told you, the next step in evolution. Phil grabbed the blonde by the waist, slipped his hand under the blanket, and hugged her. Didn't you like it? Don't you want to experience that exciting feeling again? The fire burned, licking up the last of the ashes in the barrel. Phil stroked the girl's back and lower, sliding his hand into the jeans she was wearing. Loane trembled in his arms, uncertain, frozen somewhere in the middle of the path between her old and new life. She wanted it. He could feel it, as well as the fact that Harvey's girlfriend could be more trouble than she was worth. It would be nice to figure out a way to keep his hands clean and avoid suspicion, but that could be done later. Phil lifted her face by the chin. He kissed Loane, unbuttoning and unzipping the jeans, under which she wore no underwear. The blonde refused his boxers, and there was no change of women's underwear in the trailer. Loane responded to his kisses greedily, clasping her neck with her arms. They covered the distance to the car, not noticing everything around them. The blanket was left lying trampled in the dirt somewhere in the middle of the road. Phil leaned Loane against the Pontiac, pushing his hand deeper into her jeans and continuing to kiss her, biting her full lips. He was full, and so was the blonde. This time, nothing would stop him. But what the hell? Her face was wet with tears, unlike her lower body. although he tried. Phil exhaled loudly and pulled away. "Well, no, I don't fuck crying women," he said, turning away to the dying barrel. "Get yourself together, I'll take you home." Loane sniffled loudly and began to button up. She picked up the blanket and shook it out as best she could to put it in the car. Phil Cutler poured the rest of the water into the barrel and threw away the empty bottle. He locked the trailer. He had changed the locks when he decided to make it his camouflage shelter. Or rather, he had changed the broken lock. The trailer itself had yet to be turned into something resembling a temporary shelter. For now all he had done was throw out the previous owner's things, the ones that the Zetas hadn't confiscated. They took their seats. Phil started the engine and glanced at the blonde. She frowned. "I liked that feeling," she admitted bashfully. "But I don't know what I want. Most of all, I want things to be like before. For Harvey to come back and not have to kill people to survive? Don't worry. I'll take care of it. The last thing I need is to burn down another house to hide your work," Phil thought to himself. "Are we going to Harvey's?" "Yes," Lowe nodded. "Great." He acted cleanly. He did not hang around on the same streets for a long time. He talked to the locals as if he wanted to rent a house. He found out if the neighbors were quiet, who lived nearby, how much the realtor was charging, or maybe he didn't want the house. In the dark areas, there was no water or electricity, and the garbage was not disposed of centrally. The owner, a realtor, could provide the housing with gasoline for the generator, water, and took on the removal of garbage. Then such housing was rented for money. If the tenant provided for himself, then he was not obliged to pay anyone. Phil worked according to a pattern, marking on the map areas where he had been more than once, and the date. He noted houses where unsociable loners lived, returned for them in the dead of night, and took the body to the hills. He bought a gun with a silencer, cartridges. He had to hand over the heckler cock along with the black uniform as property of Zedai. Phil tried not to cross paths with Loane unless necessary. He supplied her with fresh brains, wished her a pleasant appetite, and forgot. He met with André, prying out of him the secrets of owning a bar. Phil was not a businessman, but the idea captivated him completely. Nightlife, go-go girls, electronic music on some days and live on others, good cuisine and alcohol for every taste. And at the head of all this, himself. Isn't that a dream? André warned that alcohol supplies had become very shallow because of the barrier. The miners found fewer and fewer warehouses and factories where the goods that had not been sold 6 years ago remained. The revived Budweiser was gaining momentum in the city. They were buying raw materials from the Indians in the neighboring state. Some of the townspeople were making their own whiskey, moonshine, and liqueurs. During the conversation, André poured local alcohol into shots and Phil tasted it, making notes in a notebook. Addresses, names, booze. He would not eat these people. He would still need them. With the bar getting ready to open, Phil was increasingly thinking about how to make it easier to get food. You can't go to the corner store or order delivery. This isn't pizza. Throwing away a pizza box is easier than getting rid of a body. The epiphany came to him as he passed the last days abode. That's what he needed. Free access to the brains of the future dead. The vaccine worked, people no longer turned into zombies. Those same zombies. However, no one was going to cancel the system, at least not yet. People had gotten used to living in fear for too long to so easily give up what kept them safe. And here he is, at St. Mary's Hospital on Bellevue Avenue, waiting in the emergency room. Dr. Trenna Yates, a lonely, asexual woman in her 40s with a bad temper and a strange sense of humor. Of all the doctors Phil knew, she was the best fit to be a go-between, as she worked both at the hospital and at the abode. He could also recall that the doc had been having an affair with a sleazy salesman who had disappeared after the events of the meat grinder. Since then, it seemed, his place had been empty. Phil was beginning to lose his patience, tapping his boot to the rhythm when the door opened and a short old man swam out into the corridor. "Remember to take your pills and stay healthy." Dr. Yates leaned out into the aisle, her expression solemn as she saw her patient off, then turned her gaze to Cutler. Corporal Phil Cutler, please. I don't serve anymore. Except maybe myself, Phil walked into the office looking around. It's good to hear, probably for someone else. Get settled on the couch, prepare for anal probing without changing intonation, Dr. Yates said, pointing to a chair, and sat down opposite. Any complaints? Only one. Their eyes met for inappropriate jokes during a patient's appointment. How often do they write complaints about you to the department? I'm sure they do. But you get away with it because a good doctor is worth his weight in gold, right? Yates snorted haughtily, studying him as if she were seeing him for the first time. Phil sat back, pleased with himself. I have connections, Doc. I can finish what others started and bury your career, reputation, and peaceful life. Well, her voice didn't waver. And what do you want? First of all, I need an examination without an entry in the personal card. He tried to give her the most gracious smile he could muster. And a heart-to-heart talk. Lately I've been so lonely in this huge city. I miss a kindred spirit. If this is a pickup line, then you finished it. You're free to go. Try not to start the conversation with threats next time. The doc put the red strand of hair behind her ear, pulled the thermometer out of the cup holder and commanded, "Open your mouth." She spoke without changing her intonation, but Phil was sure that he had her hooked. He wasn't bluffing. Show a little concern, collect signatures from the dissatisfied, and present the papers to the new mayor, and the job is done. But he needed something else. Phil held the thermometer meekly in his mouth until the doc pulled it out. She glanced at the numbers, pursed her lips, and picked up the blood pressure cuff. She took his blood pressure, shone the small flashlight into each eye in turn, made him open his mouth again, and shone the light there. She took his pulse. Then Yates had him squat, watching him puzzledly from the side until she said, "Stop," and sat him down again in the chair, placing the cuff of the blood pressure cuff on Cutler's shoulder. The results were still not what she expected, because the next minute Dr. Yates pulled her chair closer to him. She stuck the olives of the stethoscope into his ears and said, "Lift up his shirt," intending to listen to his heart. Phil intercepted her hand with the membrane and smiled softly. "Easy, Doc. I see a hidden interest in me. What's changed?" The doctor frowned and decided against listening to his heart. She studied him for another minute with a very serious expression. The light gray, almost faded irises of his eyes, the pigmentless hair. She was probably recalling everything she knew about Philip Cutler, a former corporal in the U.S. Army, and comparing it with the results of her examination. Dizziness? Weakness? Noises in the ears bothering you? Healthy as an ox. Thank you. Pulse and blood pressure are several times lower than normal. I would ask how this is possible if you are not dying, but I am not sure I want to know the answer. As far as I remember, you are the guy who was saved from zombification. As you recall, Phil emphasized. Well, go ahead. Put the bricks together. You're a smart girl, aren't you? Trenna Yates was 10 years older, but he cared little for conventions now. She, passing over the dubious compliment, continued. You were supposed to be checked out through and through at Z Industries. I bet they have a massive file on your entire background. But here you are, sitting in a nasty doctor's office threatening to ruin my career because their data is out of date and you want to keep the new stuff a secret. What the hell is going on? The vaccine isn't working? Is this going to happen to everyone? She was on her feet, pushing the chair back. Phil a second later. Whatever Trenna had guessed, she was very close and very scared. Now, I need to do a blood test, she breathed, reaching for the syringe. You want to keep it a secret, no problem. I think we can come to an agreement. The package didn't break. Trenna's hands and voice lost their former firmness and Phil slowly approached, pushing her against the wall. I'm afraid this is not enough. Trenna sucked air into the syringe and stabbed, aiming for the artery in his neck. Phil slapped her hand away, the improvised weapon clattering to the floor and rolling away. She grabbed a thick folder of papers and swung. How about joining Team Meat Eaters? Phil met the blow with his hands outstretched, papers flying around. Being a vegan is boring as hell, isn't it? Kiss my ass. Well, if you insist. He prepared to lunge. All he had to do was bite the lady a little. She looked around worried, wondering what else to throw at the restless patient. He was about to start screaming "zombie" across the entire floor, and the door wasn't even locked. The orderlies would come running here, and he was gnawing at Dr. Yates for all he was worth. It couldn't be better. Okay, negotiating and recruiting new zombies isn't my thing, Phil thought, and raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Look, I have almost no experience, but I tried to do everything humanely. Join our party, use the membership bonuses, blah blah blah. And I haven't even told you about regeneration and superpowers. You'll like it. You work part-time at the abode, right? Do you have access to free brains? Ah, so that's it. Trenna wasn't going to give in. Give me your brains. Armed with the ugly statuette as a bat, she went on the attack. Tall as Cutler, and strong. The doc put all her strength into the blow to knock him out of the way and escape. And maybe if Phil had been human, she would have had a chance. He grabbed her wrists, forcing her fingers to unclench. He stepped aside, turning and taking Trenna in a circle from behind, biting into her neck, the only piece of skin free of clothing. Doc let out a strangled cry, more from the realization that she had lost than from pain, and went quiet. The door opened a few inches and then closed with an awkward ouch. Whoever had poked their nose in must have assumed the doctor was having an unofficial visit from an ardent lover, not a bite-me zombie scene. Phil sucked blood from the wounds, risking leaving a hickey, and released the doc from his tight grip. Anger, bargaining, acceptance were all things she had yet to go through. And as a doctor, she knew she had gotten herself into something very bad. The woman backed toward the door but did not run any further. There was nothing else for her to run for. What will happen to me now? What will happen to us? Phil corrected her, pulling a wad of cotton wool from the package on the table and handing it to Trenna. We'll be fine. Not without your help, of course. Well, what do you say? The club's preparation for opening was in the final stretch. A bar area, a dance podium, a chill-out with soft sofas, a dance floor in the center. Working with the designer, Phil tried to recreate his favorite club in Chicago from memory. It worked out halfway. The other half of the concept reflected the owner's proposals reworked by the designer. Fine. That seems to be fine, Steve. His new assistant stood with a tablet, crossing off completed items from the list. What about the name? He lured Steve, a black guy in his 30s, away from Andre by promising to pay him more. A couple of cooks from Lenny's lunch couldn't refuse the generous offer. The bartender found him himself, having learned that the club was preparing to open. The rest of the staff was recruited from what the labor market offered. If someone didn't try, they could always be replaced. True, there was one issue. So what's with the name? Or haven't you decided yet? Opening in 2 days. There should be something hanging over the entrance when people start pouring in. Steve stepped aside to make way for the movers. People scurried past, carrying in the remaining furniture. Don't worry, the sign is already being worked on. Phil gave his assistant a conspiratorial smile. The name will remain a secret for now. What's next on the list? He nodded at the tablet. Furniture arrangement, alcohol delivery, festive balloons. Are balloons really necessary? Because I can't imagine how to actually find them. Let's replace it. We have several bags of artificial flowers. Let them decorate the entrance and walls with them. Tell the girls that we have a green theme for the opening. It would be nice to keep it in their clothes. The place was crowded, but among the burly guys in work uniforms, the fragile blonde in heels immediately caught his eye. Phil pursed his lips as he saw her moving straight toward him. Okay. Got it. Anything else? Steve poked him with his pen, reminding him of his presence. That's all for now. Free. The assistant disappeared, heading off to run errands, and Phil, with his hands in the pockets of his black jeans, waited for his guest to swim up to the bar. Am I experiencing deja vu, or have you decided to give our relationship a second chance? he muttered, greeting the girl coldly. Champagne? There are glasses here now. That's not what I'm here for. Loane waved her hand, looking around. It looks good. Thank you. In a couple of days, everything will be shining. For now, we are just putting on the polish. Phil leaned his elbows on the counter. So what did you want? I did something I shouldn't have, Lowe said, repeating after him. You better go to Reverend J about this. Phil, something else. She lowered her voice and gave the man a meaningful look. Tense, but not as nervous as the first time. Phil shook his head and exhaled loudly. One of the reasons he didn't bite everyone in New St. Louis was because of this. What if they started killing and eating brains out of control? What if they got back to him one day? Phil was trying to make life easier for himself, taking the cushy job he deserved. After all, he'd eaten too much shit to take that risk now that he had everything he needed to live a good life. I stopped by the day before yesterday, he said out loud, meaning, what the hell, I fed you? It's not because I'm hungry. He came to me. He wanted me to. I think I lost my temper and control. Loane frowned guiltily and pouted. Turn off that crap. It doesn't work on me. Let's go for a drive, see what's going on this time. But first I need to go to the back room. Wait here, I'll be quick. Okay. Like everyone else in this town, he could carry a gun. Before the townspeople were vaccinated against the zombie virus, it was vital. Who knows? Maybe your neighbor, relative, random stranger will turn to you right now. It was everyone's duty to stop the outbreak with a controlled shot to the head. After that, it was no longer mandatory, but the law was in no hurry to abolish it. The vaccine might have passed lab tests, but who could guarantee that the suppressed virus wouldn't come back again? And Phil was sure that the real tests of this crap were taking place right now, on people who lived further, forming the statistics of those vaccinated for Zetai. However, carrying a gun and carrying a gun with a silencer are two different things. In the first case, you are a vigilant citizen. In the second, a murderer. So he kept the gun in his office, locked in a desk cabinet with a key. If Phil had suspected Harvey had a big piece of the action before, now he had no doubts. The last time he'd dropped Loane off, she hadn't invited him for coffee. But now, when she needed help, the door was open. A spacious mansion far from the ruined center and at the same time in a bright area, provided with all the benefits of civilization. Phil walked through the living room looking around. Probably only Meg and Lambert live better, he decided. So this is what it's like to be the bitch of the nation's savior. It's not funny. I'm not kidding. I'm just jealous. He followed Loane, his gaze sliding over the half-open doors. What is this? A jacuzzi? They're throwing me out of the house, the blonde sobbed, ignoring his question. At first they sent notices, like a request to leave the house by such and such a date of your own free will otherwise. And you kept quiet? All this time? What was I supposed to do? Call you? We don't get along very well if that's what it comes down to. And I doubt you'd pay the rent they asked for me. Oh God, even if I went back to Sheila and paid her every penny, I wouldn't be able to cover the debt. Duty. They'd counted the arrears from the first notice, not from the date of Harvey's death. Humane, huh? Loane chuckled nervously, glancing at him. A man showed up today. Demanded payment and a deposit for next month if I planned to stay. Or they'd throw me out today. He was so nasty he pissed me off. And then, I don't know what came over me. They stopped at the entrance to the kitchen, which was as spacious as the rest of the house. Sparkling clean, except for one small detail. A dead man in a suit on the tiled floor. This guy really pissed Loane off, or he wouldn't be lying there with a fractured skull and a butcher knife in his back. She had managed to draw the curtains, so the kitchen was slightly less light than the rest of the house. Judging by the place where the guest was caught by the rage of the new zombie, Lowe grabbed him and slammed him against the edge of the sink, maybe more than once, then took a knife from the stand and vented her anger until she came to her senses. She didn't even touch his brain. He wanted to take my home. I deserved it. Loane walked into the kitchen, leaned over the body, wondering if she should pull out the knife. But she froze. Harvey was a good man. He chose the living, but he still cared about the zombies, about what he had done to them and what he continued to do. Phil listened with half an ear. Now was the perfect time to pull the gun from his belt and put an end to this walking problem. The house was Zeta property. This guy worked for Zeta. In a few hours, God knows how long, their men would show up to throw the former mayor out the door. Would they find one body and put Loane on the wanted list? Or a body and an angry zombie who would cause more problems? That was the odds. It was necessary to hurry with the decision. I supported him all this time, and they only used another sob. All these big words about the good for the inhabitants, the new world. It's all a fucking screen. They don't care about us. They get all the best, and people like us are swept under the rug. We are needed only as long as there is some benefit in us, and then that's it. Trash. It's not fair. Not fair. Loane was shaking, standing up straight over the cold body and hugging herself. She still had her back to Phil, and he could carry out his plan without any problems. But a new plan had formed in his head. A plan in which he needed Loane alive. Quiet, baby. Quiet. Phil stepped out of the observation zone and took the girl by the shoulders, gently turning her towards him. You're right. It's not fair. They continue to live by the old rules, forgetting that the world has changed. It's time for us to declare our rights. I don't know what to do. She raised her wet eyes, looking at him with fear for herself and her future, and timid hope. Even if we get rid of the body and cover our tracks, the house will still be taken away. My house. Her full lips twisted, tears streamed down her cheeks. I was so happy here, Phil. I can't just give it away. You won't need it, Phil kissed her forehead, lifting her face by the chin. I'll sort it out. Leave this guy for now. Close all the windows and doors until I get back. Don't let anyone in. Having said this, he pulled down the flaps of his sports jacket, covering the pistol, and headed for the exit. Where are you going? It's time to voice our conditions to someone. With a final wink at the confused Loane, he left the house. It was time to announce the terms, and there was no better time. The underground Z Industries lab complex was still in operation, even after the above-ground portion of the skyscraper had been destroyed by missiles. A new club was being built on the site of one of the destroyed buildings next to it. The scientists returned to their research as soon as they could. Lambert was there more often than his half, and if Phil wanted to talk to him, he would go back to Chestnut Street. He needed Megan Dortwich, the big bitch who'd killed him the first time and, through some ridiculous set of circumstances, brought him back from his zombie-like state. Their complicated relationship had been built on his promise to come back and kill her and her fear that he would. Well, he'd come back. Twice. He'd served as a tool to eliminate Harvey from the political arena as the only guy in town whose will he couldn't bend. He'd witnessed yet another dirty secret the rest of them weren't supposed to know. He'd been needed the way Loane had been needed to entertain the phony mayor, and he knew that one day he'd be trash like her. So he'd better secure his immunity before one of the two scientists decided he knew too much. Meg had seen the bullet holes. When they decided to get rid of him, they'd shoot him in the head. Please, make yourself comfortable. A friendly woman in a business suit pointed to a chair. Miss Dortwich will be with you shortly. Thank you. Phil gave her a cold smile and watched her go to the door. He was in Dortwich's office, her residence, where all her business meetings took place. It was where she lived after her apartment in the Z Industries building had been destroyed. At first glance, it was not as luxurious as Harvey's house, and Phil was forced to take it back. Meg didn't have to wait long. A personal visit from Cutler was unlikely to arouse suspicion, and yet there was no friendly relationship between them for that to be the case. She wanted to know why he had come. She wanted to know. I didn't expect to see you here so soon. He heard a familiar voice and turned around. Meg was wearing a brick dress that fell just above her knees, a black fitted jacket and high heels. She was 4 months pregnant, and her belly, while still small, immediately drew all the attention to itself. A sleek, important bitch with too much knowledge for the last bastion of civilization. A bitch he had screwed when he was a nobody, before she had destroyed him and made him who he was. We have a complicated relationship. You must have sensed my visit. He blinked rapidly, staring at the woman. Ignoring his words, Meg took her seat at the table opposite him and, clasping her fingers together, tilted her head to the side. The new haircut and black color of her hair made her look more businesslike and more playful at the same time, although in her previous image as a long-haired brunette, Dortwich was not shy about meaningful poses. What do you need? Let's just say I want to renegotiate some things between us. Make a truce for a longer period of time than you know what. Meg glanced at the closed door. If you've come to threaten me and my child, I suggest you think carefully about what you're about to say. There's only one reason you're not on the autopsy table yet. Believe me, I'm very curious about what's going on with your body, but I'm sticking to my end of the deal. And so should you. She spoke with confidence, but deep down she was as scared as Dr. Yates. How are things with the club? Opening soon? Or even more? In 2 days. Speaking of the club, Phil moved closer. That's what I wanted to talk about. I'm not happy with the terms that 70% of the proceeds should go to the Zeta Foundation. City Hall Foundation. That's what I said. I'm not happy with the old conditions. I don't feed from the trough of the top. Unlike the dead mayor, I need to live on something, buy everything I need, pay salaries. You received capital from budgetary funds. I spent it, he shrugged. How are you supposed to support the best club in town if I give all the proceeds to you? It's not fair. And the club should be the best, because it's a great reason to honor Harvey's memory, right? Meg looked away. You'll call your lawyer and we'll re-sign the contract. Right now. I served a good purpose by ridding the city of a dictator. Now it's the city's turn to serve me, don't you think? All previous agreements between us remain in force. I'm even ready to add a mutual aid clause. You can use it in case you need anything. You know, when there's no one else to turn to. Are you offering me your services? She thought. It was a very good idea for him. He needed to offer her conditions that she would swallow like a hook. All is not well in the Danish kingdom. Something changed when Lambert locked the little grey thing underground, didn't it? He narrowed his eyes, secretly rejoicing. What if it were you next time you think, you don't know what you're talking about, I don't need it. If you want to make a night's move when you need it, call me. Well, and the point with the promise to finish you off is a little outdated. Of course, I want you to suffer, but we've been through so much together. He tried to cover her palm with his, but Meg immediately pulled away, putting her hands under the table. Oh yes, and Harvey's house. Transfer to my name. What? You decided to move there? Not necessarily moving in. Phil shrugged, smiling mysteriously. Maybe sleep over now and then. I need this house. With the Harvey girl, he can live there as long as he wants. Her debt needs to be written off too. So, it was Meg's turn to narrow her eyes and smirk skeptically. So you got laid with a whore? Even though Loane is second class to you, she is also a human being. Maybe even better than you, he said evasively and stood up, walking around the chair he had just been sitting at. So, you want all the proceeds from the club, Harvey's house, and in exchange you offer all the same, plus some favors. Although I seriously doubt what else you can do for me. Oh, and a promise not to kill me. If that's all, then you don't have enough cards to tip the scales in your favor. Why can't I just lock you in a box or put a bullet in your head? What else can you offer? It's very simple, Meg. Phil took a deep breath and placed his hands on the iron back of the chair. He had already become familiar with uncontrollable outbursts of rage. Apparently this came with rapid regeneration and vitality. In this state he could punch through walls with his fist and accidentally maim others. Loane, in a fit of such rage, finished off a poor guy who said something she didn't want to hear. Phil caught himself in such outbursts, however, he learned to cope with them very quickly. In military operations, he had to sit in ambush for a long time, even out his breathing behind a sniper rifle, and of course curb his temper when the military leader was an idiot. All this helped him not to screw up. And at the same time, Phil learned to induce this state when he wanted. There are more like me than you think. They are no different from you in skin color, eyes, and hair. If you take me away, another will come, he said, pushing through the thick iron back with his hands. Meg froze, unable to take her eyes off the chair he was breaking. The sound of breaking wood filled the room. If you want to walk down the street, we'll be right there. One bite and you know what you'll become? One of us, dependent on human flesh. And what about the baby? Are you ready to produce a monster on our account? Half zombie, half human. Call it what you want. We both know who I am since I came back from the dead, and what you'll face if you try to cheat. So let's stick with my proposal and move on to the long-awaited piece. What do you say? Should I call a lawyer? Or do it yourself? He finally let go of the backrest, leaving a bent frame, a cracked sheet of wood. He waved towards the exit. No need for a lawyer. Meg gave in. I'll do it myself. That's great. See what progress we've made? We're doing great. The hour X had arrived. The building, built from scratch on the site of ruins, was ready to receive its first visitors. The entrance was decorated with artificial flowers and greenery. A red carpet with gold rope barriers led from it inside, so that everyone who entered could feel like a star. The cooks were finishing the first batch of hot appetizers. The bartender was warming up at the counter with a shaker. The dancers were languidly moving near the poles on the podium to neon lights and electronic music. Phil looked over his possessions with the eye of a picky client, and so far he liked everything. Andre warned him that there were a lot of little things that could go wrong at the most crucial moment. This was a trial run, and that was normal. But right now Phil was determined to succeed. Steve found him on his way back from the street. Phil, this is the bomb. There's a line, and people are coming. Everyone wants to honor Harvey and have a good time, the assistant said. Great. Time to cut the ribbon. Phil clapped him on the shoulder. See the sign? What do you think? The sign had been delivered this morning, installed a couple of hours ago, and he hadn't had time to ask his assistant's opinion yet. Steve shook his head provocatively, braided in a mass of pigtails. If I didn't know you, I'd think that was pure racism, but... The Z word? Seriously? We live in a new world and look fear in the face. Phil gave him a smile, found a worried Loane with his eyes and winked at her. Let's be bold, let's be the new trend. Well, it's too late to change anyway. That's great. Let's go meet the guests. Phil nodded to him and walked down the red carpet to the exit. Loane, in a green dress that showed off her luscious curves, stood nervously at the door. She was supposed to be dealing with clients and making sure everyone was happy. It'll be okay. Relax, Phil said, taking her shoulder. Watch your breathing, smile, don't drink too much. Basically, just be yourself. What if? You know. She made big eyes. No ifs. The anti-emetic is in my office. He glanced sideways at Steve, explaining as he went. Loane gets nauseated. From nerves. Ah, well, I see. He shrugged. Leaving Lo alive was the best decision. The city needed a beautiful story honoring the dead mayor, and he would give it to her. Who better than a widow as the receptionist to grace the evening? Phil Cutler took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He put his hands on the doors, ready to push them open. Steve and Loane took their place behind him. This was history. The hour when a boy who had lost too much would take back what was his and then some. He was no longer a soldier, and he'd never wanted to be one. The contract had been his father's way of making his son dance to his tune. He had been used as a tool. In Iraq before the zombie apocalypse and here after. Phil was no longer going to serve other people's interests. If that meant eating brains and keeping the new mayor in fear, so be it. Let's go. He pushed the handles, throwing the doors open. There on the street outside was a real ribbon to cut and a line at least 10 yards long. Phil hoped to see Meg Dortwich among the guests. maybe even Lambert. He had sent an invitation to his personal physician, Trena Yates, too. He was greeted with a standing ovation, and all that was missing was the flashing of cameras to make him feel like the king of the party. When the crowd had quieted down, he gave a short speech of welcome, introduced his assistant, thanked Loane for her assistance, and finally invited everyone to celebrate the opening. The line slowly made its way into the club along the red carpet. Above them was a plastic sign with large letters illuminated on the back. White Zombie greeted the guests. 0703-9803-2022.